Hello and welcome back. The last two episodes have been heavily focused on my research into whether black veterans attended the 1913 Gettysburg reunion or not. Today we're doing something totally different. While writing the Old Soldier Show, I found far more material than I could ever fit into one book. And honestly, that was sometimes a big problem. I wanted the book to be thorough, but I also didn't want it to overstay its welcome. So I was always trying to find that balance between including just enough information and including way too much. As a result, some of the great stories simply didn't make it into the final cut. So I thought I'd share some of them as supplemental material here. Today I'll be reading a memoir written by a Confederate veteran shortly after the 1913 Gettysburg reunion. The author was Louis Daniel Hilliard, who served in the artillery under Colonel Edward Porter Alexander, the Confederate artillery commander best known for directing the massive bombardment that preceded Pickett's charge. Now, Hilliard's granddaughter later submitted his memoir to the state archivist in Richmond, Virginia, where it now resides in the Library of Virginia. According to the granddaughter, Hilliard went on sick leave during the final days of the Civil War. After recovering, he started back towards the Confederate Army at Appomattox. But somewhere along the way, he learned that Robert E. Lee had already surrendered, and for him, the war was over. And because Hilliard hadn't actually been present when Lee surrendered, he apparently always liked to claim that he had never surrendered to the Yankees. 50 years later, he returned to Gettysburg for the reunion, and here is his story. 50 years is a long time. We forget a great many things in that time. Some are dimly remembered, but others we never forget. Among the events that have made an indelible impression upon my memory is the Battle of Gettysburg. For many years, I had intended to visit that historic field. On the night of July 1st, 1913, I again reached the same field, but under very different circumstances. On my first visit, I was an intruder. My last visit was upon the invitation of the state of Pennsylvania and the United States government, which had appropriated $300,000 to entertain some others and me. On my first visit, I left on the 4th of July, but as I told some citizens of Gettysburg while passing through the town, that we did not retreat, we only evacuated. Our host had made every reasonable provision for our entertainment, and we certainly had a good time. The old vets who had fought here in '63 had no trouble in locating the positions at which they had fought on that memorable field. So well had the battlefield been mapped that the position of every command was shown by tablet or monument for each of the 3 days of battle. The next day after getting to camp, I went over to the Yankee camp in search of an old comrade, Tommy Thurston of Company C, 55th Virginia Regiment. By the way, the Yankee veterans of his town paid his way to Gettysburg. He came hoping to meet some of his old company, but as far as he could find out, he was the only one there. While in the Yankee lines, they learned from me that my battalion of artillery was Colonel Alexander's 1863, and some of them made an appointment with me to pilot them over the Confederate Avenue, which covers the line of the Confederate troops as they were in the third day's fight. My new Yankee friends were on time, and we started at 7 a.m., returning to camp about 10:30. General J. Thompson Brown, the commander of the United Confederate Veterans, the Virginia Division, told me where my battalion had fought in the last day's battle. General Brown was a captain in the same battalion. To me, this was by far the most impressive part of my trip. I was struck with the fact that my memory had not failed me as to the outline and general features of the battlefield, and I found I would have no difficulty in pointing out the places of interest. I went directly to the spot where my battery had stood, and there, mounted, were 2 guns of my battery on the identical spot, where they had fought 50 years before. This was indeed a surprise to me, especially so when I recognized one of them as being my old gun. Having dismissed my Yankee friends, I was hardly back in camp before a second squad came over and wanted me to conduct them over the field. It was now 11 o'clock and very warm, but I could not refuse them, and so I carried them over the very same lines, a distance of about 3 miles. This time, we didn't get back to camp until 2 p.m., and I was very tired. But I enjoyed the experience, and the Yankees seemed to enjoy it too. While in their lines, I got information that the enemy was going to attack us that night. On getting back to camp, I found that the rebels had prepared to meet them. About sunset, they came, headed by a band and keeping step to Dixie. Well, the rebels met them at the edge of the camp, and to be sure, they had a grand time. Handshaking and shouting and hurrahing. They were the happiest set of old people I'd ever seen. About 9 p.m., under the cover of darkness, the Yankees retreated. The following morning, the Rebs charged the Yankees over the same field they had charged 50 years ago. They were headed by a band playing Yankee Doodle, and this time, they were not repulsed. They were welcomed, and a happy time ensued. I verily believe the Rebs enjoyed the reunion far more than the Yanks. We were the guests of our former enemies, who were trying to provide a good time for us, and we had it. A private soldier has very little opportunity to see or know what is going on in the battle beyond his own immediate position. But in this battle, I had the opportunity to witness the charge of Pickett's men across the field until they were met and repulsed in the deadly collision, which General John B. Gordon said shook the continent. Well, the great reunion is over, and I'm glad that I have lived to take part in it. I am sure there has never been such an event in this country, nor will there be another unless our grandchildren shall celebrate the centennial of this battle in 1963. And if this is done, I hope that some of my children's children will go to Gettysburg to pay tribute to the place where I fought. I really enjoy Hilliard's account because it gives us a glimpse of the reunion through the eyes of someone who had actually fought there 50 years earlier. And one of the things that stands out for me is just how friendly everyone seems to have been. It's easy for us looking back from the 21st century to imagine that those former enemies must have hated each other, that the Confederate and Yankees who returned to Gettysburg were still carrying the anger and bitterness of the war with them. But that was actually one of the things that surprised me most when I started researching the reunion. And again, I found accounts of former enemies meeting on the battlefield, shaking hands, swapping stories, and asking about each other's experience during the war. They were often genuinely interested in hearing the other side's perspective. And I think that's pretty clear from Hilliard's account. I don't detect any real animosity there. Instead, he talks about making new Yankee friends, spending hours with them, and wandering the battlefield, and then joining in the handshaking, the shouting, and the hurrahing when the two sides came together. But the moment I keep coming back to is when Hilliard found the spot where his battery had stood on July 3rd, 1863. And there on that very ground was his old gun. How he recognized the old cannon, I have no idea. Maybe there's a serial number or some other identifying mark that he remembered, or maybe there was something about it that only he could recognize. Whatever the reason, I don't doubt the claim. Hilliard doesn't tell us exactly what went through his mind at that moment, but after half a century standing again on the battlefield and suddenly coming face to face with something he had known during those terrible days of 1863, I can only imagine it must have been an incredibly emotional experience. 50 years is a long time, as Hilliard said at the beginning of his memoir. We forget a great many things, but apparently, some things we never forget. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.